Welcome to Literary Deep Dives and Discussions with me, A.L. Liskey, the author of the Unseen Operative series. I have joined with me today author Jacqueline Mathias. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
So, for all the viewers out there, Jacqueline has written this lovely book called Look Before You Leprechaun. It is one of the first indie books that I ever read after becoming a published author, and I have only good things to say about it. But you'll get to hear the wonderful things that I think about it throughout this episode. I'm sure I've also posted a review about it, which can be seen through my author profile. Since we have Jacqueline here, let's start out getting to know a little bit about you. Tell us what began your writing journey and what brought you to become a published author.
Okay, so I actually grew up with my older sister's writing, so it kind of in the family, and I've always known writing growing up. I don't remember a time where I wasn't writing. I think it's kind of funny to dive into the world of other authors and stuff and realize that there's a lot of people who didn't start writing until they were teens or older. When I started when I was really young, and it's always been a really big part of my life.
About how young were you when you started? Because I mean, anybody who can see this video can see that you are still fairly young. So
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I'm 20 right now. I'd say I was probably 9 when I actually could start writing. So it's been
You just always
been
knew
a
you would
while.
be an author?
I'm not sure. I always knew that I would write, and when I finished a book and I was proud of it, that was kind of just the next step, and I published it. I self-published it, and I don't know. It was never really a big decision for me. So yeah.
It's very natural. I like that. Also how you said it was your older sister's writing. I'm kind of the same. My older sister, she has this book that I can't remember the title now, but something absurdum that takes place in World War II, but it's got a fantasy mix to it. She's been writing it for years. And hearing about her story made me think, someday I want to write a book, but I was never going to write a fiction book. But it really came down to my older sister being, that was the giant that I stood on. And now I have a book and she will publish her someday. I know it. But does your sister have published books?
I have 3 older sisters, and one of them has self-published a book. But all of them have written before, but they've never really taken it as seriously as me. It was kind of more just a hobby for them. And I don't know if I was just trying to one-up them or what, but here I am.
That's fantastic. Okay, so this book specifically, I love this book so much. Little backstory of how I came into possession of this book. I had just recently joined the social media bookstagram community. I was not going to do it. Some days I still kick myself for joining, to be honest. But I was doing a lot of read for reads like authors do, and I had read a lot of other indie fantasy authors' books, and I have to say I was utterly disappointed. I was not going to do it anymore. I was like, you know what? I have no faith in indie authors. I'm done. And then, I don't know, there's some post you put, and it was completely unlike any other indie authors that I've seen. The way that you were advertising your book was not even advertising your book. You were so chill and real about it that I was like, you know what? I'm going to read her book, and if it's no good, then I'm done. And I was to this day, this book, I swear, is the #1 book that I recommend to everybody who's like, I need an indie author book. I'm like, Look Before You Leprechaun. It's golden. I am amazed at the profound things that you wrote in that book. It is a fun book. It is a deep book. It has so many truths and principles and realities in it that I was just utterly mind blown. And then finding out your age, I was just shocked. How can somebody this young write something this good? I don't even know. Tell me about this book. What inspired this book?
Honestly, well, I'm not actually sure. That sounds bad. I think when I started writing it, I kind of just sat down, I started writing, and at the time, one of my younger sisters was writing a book with leprechauns in it, or a leprechaun, I'm not sure. And so it might have just been on the top of my mind, and I just decided to write about leprechauns. It was just fun. That's all it was. I can't give anyone a real answer to what inspired it or anything, because I just wrote it.
It just came out of you?
It just came out of me.
Was there any planning at all in it, or was it really was just flow to the end?
Well, for the first draft, it kind of just wrote itself. And then the second draft, because I was being a little bit more serious about it and I wanted to improve it, I did write out an extensive outline. I'm glad I did. And I got feedback and everything. I mostly wrote the whole thing just for fun.
That's brilliant. It's also amazing to me just because of the material that's in it. Some of that, it feels so natural, so relatable, and so real that I'm not quite sure that it could be planned out other than, just coming from a real person. But like I said, there are some things in there that I'm like, dang, how does this girl know this stuff? Um, so yeah, that's interesting that it just came from you. Were there any life experiences that you found were put in there, or was it just imagination?
There probably were some life experiences that I drew from, especially the setting. It's set in California, and I live in California, and I really love the weather here and the trees and the animals that are here and everything and just the vibe. And so I really drew from that for the setting. And then the experiences that the characters have probably drew from some experiences I've had, but I can't directly draw from my own life because then it feels kind of like too real for me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I would say yes, maybe some things are inspired by my experiences, but there's nothing in there that's directly from my life.
Super, man. It just makes it all the more brilliant. My goodness. We can talk a little more about those deeper things later on in the podcast. Fascinating. Your characters, they really are absolutely real. What was it like for you? This journey of discovering how do I self-publish? How do I edit? How do I find the beta readers, the ARC readers, all of that? What was it like learning all that for you?
That's a good question. I will say that I did not go on a very, I'm trying to find the right words. I didn't know very much about indie publishing before I published the book. So I'm still learning, and I know my next book will be much, much better and everything in that sense. But from what I've learned, leading up to it, I watched a lot of YouTube videos about it, and especially Abby Emmons, if you know her YouTube channel. She's got really good YouTube videos about writing and stuff and about self-publishing, and I think that I was blessed to have those YouTube videos to watch and to learn indie publishing from. And then I didn't have any real editors. I didn't actually do any beta reading other than my family members. So my mom was my editor, and she's really good at catching little things. So I'm glad she was there and she helped me with some stuff with the editing. So yeah, that's kind of how it went, the process for me.
Does she have any English literary experience or good
Not
at writing?
officially, no. Yeah, I just have a really, really good literate family, I guess.
Amazing. I mean, because this book, like I said, I read a lot of indie fantasy authors, and as far as grammar, punctuation, editing goes, your book had them all beat by a mile. It's very well edited, so wow, congrats.
Thank you.
So just for all of our viewers out there, a little bit about the book. Look Before You Leprechaun follows a main character who is a leprechaun, but not an actual leprechaun. It's quite a fascinating story. You have a handful of characters. I was actually joking with an author in my previous podcast that it would be very hard to write a book with a cast of 10 or so characters. And you have a couple more than 10, but you have just around that. And yet they're also very much alive. So I was wondering, do you have a favorite character, or what is something you like about each of your characters?
Ooh. I don't know if I have a favorite character. I might want to say Jack. I think he's probably everyone's favorite character, honestly. But I like them all, and I spent a lot of time figuring out their strengths and weaknesses and stuff. So I feel very fondly about all of them.
I personally, like you're saying, I'm definitely a huge fan of Jack in the sense that I grew up in an abusive household by one parent, and so I was amazed. And talking to you now that you haven't necessarily had that experience, I'm double amazed that you would write his character so profoundly accurate to how that feels. I mean, aside from no one in my family has a psychotic ability. Being psychic is utterly cool. I think that is a wonderful spin you did on it. But a thing that does arise from neglect and abuse is often some form of mental disorder, mental illness. And
yes,
there's these phases that goes through to disassociating. Psychic ability kind of mirrors, but then also his sense of, I deserve better, and yet I don't. And suddenly, I'm the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. I don't want to be by my abuser, and yet I feel sorry for my abuser. These real contradictory experiences that you captured.
Yeah, it can be really confusing.
But they're so accurate that it's wow. I was just half of my tabs are literally notes on that because human behavioral studies is my major. So I was geeking out over all this, she used this and she used this concept, but you didn't plan any of these things out. It happened. So it's mind blowing to me because it is literally that accurate to if somebody wants to know what it's like to be an abused child and have those frustrations, like that was very, very well done. But your other characters as well, like they're so human. There's not like a single person who doesn't have a flaw, but also isn't a good person. And I think that's just something that's incredible because so many books that I've read, the bad guy is just bad. The good guy is just good, or they might have a tiny flaw and that's it for the rest of the story. But yours are like, everybody gets betrayal at one point. Everybody has trust issues at some point. Everybody does something fantastic for another person at some point. It's so lively. I think that's just brilliant.
I do want to say, I think I've had a couple people tell me that Cynthia is not a very fleshed out, developed character. When I hear that, I think that's pretty funny because she is a very simple character, but I gave her some very specific flaws, and I know myself as the author that yes, she is very fleshed out. Her main flaw is that she's selfless to a fault. She doesn't know when to stop helping someone, And I guess some people don't see that as a flaw. But for her, she needs to learn to set boundaries, and she does that throughout the book. So yeah.
But yeah, Cynthia, to me, she's not one of those characters that's constantly in the spotlight per se, but she definitely has, she's got her personality. And like you said, she learns throughout the book. I'd honestly say she has some pretty powerful things to say emotionally towards the end of the book. So that's funny. But I guess as authors, we do get criticism from time to time that makes very little sense to what we wrote.
Yeah. I can see from somebody else's perspective how they would see that. Because she's not a very interesting character, that doesn't mean that she's not developed.
Exactly. And when it comes to readers, everybody has a different style, a taste. I've also often noticed most criticism tends to come from other writers because you haven't written in their way or their fashion or their style. That's always intriguing to me to get feedback like that. How do you deal with criticism, whether it's from other authors or readers?
I haven't gotten a whole lot of criticism. I think the main criticism I do get is really just when somebody gives me a review and they say like, oh, it just wasn't my genre or something like that. So yeah, I don't really have very much to say about other than what someone has said about Cynthia. That just kind of amused me. I haven't got a whole lot of criticism yet. I'm still very small of an author.
I definitely encourage, keep that attitude. When criticism does come, it's good to just be amused by it. For myself, I found that's the best way to handle it, really, because you know your book as an author. And yes, there are occasional books out there that seriously need work, but I've often found that when that is the case, the people giving the feedback, they're not rude about it. They're usually very kind. Your book, I would not change a thing about it. So like I said, I'm not surprised you haven't got criticism. But yeah, some readers, it's not their genre, and that's just a reality we authors have to face. For me, not every mystery reader is going to like my niche of speculative mystery thriller. They'll probably pick it up and be like, what? No. Just being positive about it keeps it going. So indie publishing, you are on Amazon. Did you ever look at any other indie routes, or was that it for you?
I have also published on Barnes & Noble Press, and I used Draft to Digital for the ebook. And then I have researched other sites and stuff, and I've considered for my next book doing, what's it called, Ingram's Bark. But I might actually go traditional with my second book. I'm not sure.
Ooh, that's a fun process, querying and all. Have you got certain agents that you've got lined up in your mind that you'd like to try to get?
Not really, no. I did query for my first book for a while, and then I just realized that it wasn't really a book that most publishers or agents would be looking for. I think mainly because it kind of starts out a little bit slow and it's not a neatly packed into a specific genre. I decided to just self-publish it, and it worked out.
I queried as well for my first book, and my book is over 700 pages, so you can imagine that the beginning is a little bit to swallow.
Yeah.
They don't like to publish that. But I was at an indie bookstore today, and I picked up a book that was published by HarperCollins, which is one of the big 5 presses, and it was over 700 pages, big thick thing, super excited to read it. But I'm looking at that and I say to myself, this was published in the last 5 years. What's wrong with a bigger book? I don't know.
Right.
Really, when it comes down to agents, it's not so much about whether or not your book is good enough, so much as hitting the right agent at the right time. There's a little bit of luck that goes into it, I think. What has been the most challenging thing for you in your author journey?
The most challenging thing probably more recently, is it's really hard to keep my creative writing as something that I enjoy doing just for the sake of doing it and not thinking about how I'm going to monetize it and how, like, is this good enough for publishing? You know, as I'm writing my next book, that's a learning curve that I'm going to have to push through and figure out. Yeah, it's hard to not get sucked into like just doing it for the money or doing it to entertain other people when it started out as something that I just enjoy and I want to keep it that way.
There is a lot of pressure that goes into being an author, regardless of whether you're traditional or indie. And it is like that, especially social media, I would say, is the biggest culprit of it, is these constant comparison expectations we have of, you know, so-and-so they look very successful. They seem to be doing pretty well as an author. How do I aspire to that? How do I reach that? YouTube as well is huge on being like, this is how you can make triple digits or whatever per year on Amazon KDP, and they shove it down your throat, and it's like it can make you feel very small. So it's sometimes it really is just reminding yourself and going back to that place of, as an author, I want to do this for joy. Money's cool and all, but if there's no joy in doing your craft, it's very, very difficult to continue to do it.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, what is the greatest joy?
Ooh. I really like it when I get some inspiration randomly, you know, out of thin air, and I can sit down and I can write for a really long time. I really enjoy writing and weaving the story itself. You know, when there's no other like pressure from any other direction, you know, and when I'm not telling myself that it has to be really good, but I'm just focused on writing what I'm inspired to write. I really, really enjoy that.
Yes, that is the best feeling of all. Absolutely agree. Do you have any fun or weird places that you just get inspired from?
Inspiration generally comes just really randomly for me. Like the other day I was inspired. I was on Reddit, on like a writing subreddit, and I had just given someone some advice about, I don't even remember what it was about, but I just randomly had the idea for one of like the next scene, to write the next scene. And it wasn't related to what I had just written, but it just popped into my head. And maybe it was because I was like on a platform with a community of other writers or something. I don't know. It really comes out of nowhere for me.
Yeah, I relate to that. That's the reason I have so many, like, I email myself all the time if I'm out in public and I don't have anything to write on, or at home I have sticky notes everywhere, I have notebooks everywhere. It's a cohesive nonsense of ideas and inspiration, but sometimes it can be hard, you know, like if I'm sitting watching a movie with my spouse and suddenly the next scene hits, I have to stop and type it. No idea what's going on the screen, and he'll be laughing at whatever I did, and afterwards say, "That was a great movie." What movie? I'm in the middle of my book right now. So your family, because I have seen them on your social media on occasion with you and your book, how do they feel about it? What is it like? Pop ideas off of them? Are they super excited for you as well? What does that support look like?
Sometimes they get annoyed because I talk too much about my stories, but generally I'll have an idea and I'll discuss it with them. And I think they enjoy it. I don't know. I'd have to ask them.
That's funny. I think my sister always got felt that we were irritated with her when she was sharing her book. But I was really always just sitting there thinking, how are you coming up with this world and this process and this magic, especially based off of a historical event? Like, mind blowing. But I think that's what it is to be an author. Your head works differently, and others don't always get it, but to some it is absolutely inspirational. You're writing about the profound. Yes, writing about the profound, that is speculative fiction in its finest. I love it. All the deep, you know, principles, the things that you can learn about it. Speculative fiction all the way. Mystery thriller, that is my thing. But for you, it's throwing a dragon. For me, it's throwing a subconscious society in dreams. That is my fantasy element in my book series. So yeah, I can't wait for this. This is going to be fantastic. There's such a drive nowadays that I'm seeing with growing authors to put in these deeper, profound messages about things like mental health, about things like relationships, about things like, you know, justice, truth, accountability. And like for me, that is what I'm exploring as an author. I think that these things are the things that matter most. All fiction should be teaching something. It should be connecting with something. Mental health especially, it's something that isn't just in one field like everyone thinks it is. They think, you know, that should be a psychology book, sociology book. And no, this is a reality book. This is about truth. This is about life. This is about meaning. And it's exciting to know that those principles can come up in a different way. I could probably go on all day about that, to be honest.
Same, yeah.
It's very prominent in my family. Abnormal psychology was a huge part of my major, and then I do sit on the board of a nonprofit that disperses healthy relationship education. So it's always fun doing that. What kind of aspects of it are you hoping to cover, or do you cover rather, I should say, since you do have the first draft done?
As you know from my first book, I cover a lot of different things that I don't even know that I'm covering. I'm hoping that I'm writing it realistically, but my main character has PTSD. Also, it's going to, oh, that's a spoiler. Should I say that?
People love spoilers.
Okay.
I've noticed it usually
Okay.
makes people buy the books more, which is hilarious to me.
I'm going to have a mild theme of suicide, like, in the end. And it's going to be very, very mild because it's such a sensitive topic. I don't want to, like, really go deep into that sort of thing. But it felt right for the story when I was writing the first draft. So
that is a deep topic. Suicide. I was actually discussing that a couple episodes ago with Luella Rains was her name. Suicide is a huge topic in my second book too, but not in its actual form because other spoiler alert, somebody clock out. They aren't actually suicides. They are premeditated murders. Yeah. Oh no. But it was heart-wrenching to write. I had to write one of them. I didn't give it any graphic detail. I'm not that kind of author. I'm very much closed door. I'm not going to give you all the blood and gore. That is not my genre. But still having to live in that mental capacity of that because before I was born, my uncle committed suicide, and then I've had 3 close friends commit suicide. And I used to have an eating disorder, which the hormonal imbalance that I had in trying to regain my health threw me into that ideation for a while as well. And so it is a very deep and heavy topic,
yeah,
but it is
really
something that I
is.
do feel is important to talk about and to write about because a lot of folks just immediately assume that if suicide is involved, it's because a person has been bullied or because they hate themselves and they hate their lives. And a lot of times that does go in. But I dare say the majority of times it's not that simple. It's never so black and white.
Yeah, definitely.
So what have you been learning as you've been exploring that?
Well, I really enjoy researching mental health stuff, any kind. I feel like that's kind of an awkward question for me to try and answer because it's kind of a part of my writing process already. So I don't really think about like what I learn from this or what I learn about this.
Just something exploratory that as you go, you just kind of discover and it gets written in.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, and then PSTD. So, there are very different forms of PSTD. So I will be intrigued to see how that goes. I did actually have an individual in my life that had PSTD, and there was one time that I made the mistake of going behind them. Should not have done that. Never seen such a look of terror in my life when they turned around. It was very, very bad. But yeah, that is something
the
that
interesting
I briefly touch on in my
thing
book.
I only know from my experience is complex PTSD, and it's completely different because with her it's from one specific traumatic event. And yeah, it's really interesting to put myself in her position in my mind and like try and figure out how she would react and stuff like that.
Brilliant. I love that you brought up that terminology. I have had an episode before where I talked about this, but yeah, it's for everybody viewing. There are different forms there's chronic, there's acute, and there's complex. And what one of them means is essentially it's one singular episode. It's acute. Something happened. You have been traumatized. You have anxiety. It doesn't matter if it's traumatic disorder or anxiety disorder. Acute is just one time, whereas chronic is ongoing. Complex is multiple different factors coming in, usually for a chronic period. They can be acute. They can be chronic. It's just a mix of things. And more often than not, complex is usually what occurs to most folks who do have anxiety disorders, traumatic disorders, and society just looks at that and they're like, well, for shame, you should just, buck up and square up your shoulders, get over it and all that. And no, it's not that simple. It's funny to me because some of the most high functioning individuals, especially in major industries, have these complex traumas and complex anxiety disorders, and nobody judges or thinks about that until the moment that they're like, I have this, and you're like, how can you be so successful? Because it's not about intelligence, it's about difficulty.
I think that something that most people probably don't really understand is that people with different mental health issues or struggles, they also do have certain superpowers that come with it. Like people with ADHD, they also are really good at like reading a room or, choosing a path that's not one that most people would choose, but they're really good at it and stuff like that. So many different disorders or struggles that people have. They also have upsides to that. They can like harness their problems and, use them for good in their life.
Some of the people that I've met that are the most abused in their lives, they have this beautiful confidence that they can just walk in anywhere, command a room, give a speech, everyone looks up to them because they have that filter. That is their superpowers. They can filter
Mm-hmm.
confidence. They can filter being okay. And it's not like a fake filter. It's just that's who they are. They can
Yeah.
be okay in that moment and be just there and be shut out from all the bad stuff that's happening. It's amazing to me, but autism as well. My husband's brother is autistic, and the things that he can do at a complex speed level that I'm just like miles behind trying to understand. It's incredible. It is a
Mm-hmm.
superpower, but I think that's with any limitation in life. There are ways to live beyond those limits because of those limits. And for me, like from a Christian perspective, I've always seen that as the incredible grace of God working in us as humans to
Exactly.
show us that no matter how defeated we may feel or difficult being mortal is, He's given us ways to overcome it because of His Son. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can go on Christian themes all day, but because
Same,
you're a fellow
yeah.
Christian as well, I was going to ask,
Mm-hmm.
how does your faith affect your writing or how does it show up in your writing?
That's a really good question. I try not to be preachy in my writing. I've seen a lot of other books, Christian books, that they kind of feel like the gospel in them is forced. And I don't really like that because I want to focus on the story, you know? So I try not to be preachy, but I try to include elements of principles that I've learned in my faith. I have explored different ways of like including my faith in my writing because it is a very important thing to me. And I just think that making sure that my characters learn something that is valuable, and I don't want to have any truly morally gray characters. I have values and standards for my own writing that really helps me be at peace with my writing and cater to people who they're looking for books that are not explicit in certain ways. And I can confidently go up to them and say, like, oh, my book has the deeper themes. It has one of the characters is abused and all this stuff, but it also leads you as the reader and leads the characters towards happiness and towards self-improvement. And I think that that's a lot of that comes from my faith.
Love that. I could definitely tell that that's working in you the way that you're describing it because like I said, I grew up in an abusive household and yet I read your book and I was not triggered, not in the least. I felt connected to it. I felt uplifted by it. And that's the kind of book that the world needs because it's as you're saying, like some authors just put just anything in there and readers will be traumatized and triggered by their books. But if your book is
Yeah.
grounded just on some good solid principles, just good ways to live life, good ways to understand things, people don't have to get triggered and they can still learn about the deeper things. So I absolutely
Mm-hmm.
love that. Also, what you're saying though about morally great characters, let's be real. Everyone thinks that they're so cool and they're really not. I can't
Mm-hmm.
think of anything interesting or solid or legitimately, I mean, the world wants to think morally gray men specifically are sexy. And to me, I'm like, what is attractive? What is great? What is trustworthy or even intriguing to you about someone who has absolutely no foundation, no sense of right or
Right.
wrong? And like, who are they? Why would you want to
Uh-huh.
be by that? I don't know, but
That's not his personality. I'm not going to say I write morally gray characters because even if I have a character who does start out morally gray, or at some point in the books is, they're not going to stay that way.
Exactly. For my own character explorations, I like to look at different moral systems, not in like the sense of, I think that doing this is okay when you don't, but more of like everybody conducts themselves with dignity, but they do it in a different style. They do it under a different belief of,
Exactly.
this is what I think justice is versus what you think justice is, but they can still coexist. That could be just because I deal with the legal system like crazy in my books, but hey. Okay, what is something that you hope that your readers will feel when they finish your books?
I think the main thing I want my readers to feel is just less alone. Like they read something that touched them emotionally and felt very close and true to them. I've read a lot of books that don't do that, and they're just, they're not bad books, but they don't really truly make me feel like I'm less alone. Like, make things relatable in a sense, people can feel like they're not alone in the experiences that they have.
Of that. I think that's one of the keys that make a book timeless. Part one being, having those embedded principles of truth that everybody can relate to and touch on and live. But then, yes, having that human connection, that personal touch to it, that makes it something very timeless. It actually calls to my mind, like, the works of J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you've read any of their works. I'm sure you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies or whatever, but
I actually
works like
haven't.
that. You haven't? Oh my goodness.
No.
I am shocked.
I read the Chronicles of Narnia and other C.S. Lewis things, but I haven't seen Lord of the Rings or anything.
I'd highly recommend. I think you'd find a lot of enjoyment in it because he does both very, very Christian authors embedding those principles in.
Yes.
And I mean, for me, like that's kind of what I wanted to do with mystery is let's put truth in there, but let's put connection. And I think that's the more modern take that really is the best part of making a timeless book is to have that connection with your readers. So have you discovered anything about yourself since becoming an author, since, taking up this writing journey?
I can't say anything specific, but I do feel like the writing journey is just a journey of discovery for me, and it always has been because I write to get things out and to help myself understand the world around me and the world inside me. So I feel like I am the person I am today because writing has helped me understand myself better.
I love it. Writing is fantastic for processing and yes, discovery. It's not just about making meaning of life. It's about finding more life in many ways. What piece of advice would you give aspiring authors?
I think that the most important thing that I've learned about writing, there's going to be a lot of things online that are like writing rules or people telling you what you should or shouldn't do with your writing. And some of those are good and most of them are like, they're good guidelines. But I think that you should always take it with a grain of salt when you hear some advice and make sure that it works with you and not against you. Because I've heard of a lot of things, I try to take into my writing and use for my writing and they don't work. And they just make me feel less passionate about it. Don't let people tell you what you should or shouldn't do with your writing. Think about it for a little bit first, at least.
Our decisions need to bring us peace. If it's something that's causing mass anxiety, mass difficulty, there's a difference between challenging yourself to do something and forcing yourself to do something and grinding through it.
Yeah.
I get tired of seeing authors who really feel like they're grinding through marketing, grinding through all these other things. I'm like, that's not the journey. The journey is joy. And if you're not having joy, you better quit that journey or you need to do something different because, why we have so much time in this life. Why would you waste it doing something you absolutely hate? If writing is your joy, return to that joy. Change what's not working. So
exactly.
I love your advice. It's good to be informed, but not conformed. Looking up into the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where are you hoping to be as an author?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I do have a goal someday of directing films, specifically films based on books that I wrote, because I'm also interested in that, in film directing and cinematography and stuff. I haven't practiced it a whole lot, but I'm very, very intrigued by just any form of storytelling. And I feel like my stories and the way that I do things would translate really well to film directing. And I hope that someday I'll be able to start doing that.
That'd be so cool. If you make Look Before You Leprechaun into a movie, I would be so psyched.
I think I would
die from excitement.
I really want to.
It would be a great mini-series. I don't think you could honestly condense this into a 2-hour movie without it losing some of its quality.
I tried, actually. I can't do it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Are you going to go to college then for cinematography?
I'm not sure. I kind of broke at the moment, so I can't. But maybe in the future, people will be like actually starting to realize that I'm good at writing and they'll like buy my books more. And then I'll have more money.
And then scholarships. Always look for the niche scholarships. I was very broke as well. And I made it through college all the way through scholarships because they specifically have hidden scholarships. Say hidden, they're actually not hidden. It's just people don't apply for them because they think they won't qualify. If you just apply for every little thing under the sun that you could stretch to qualify for, they usually just give it to you. It's so funny. There's
Okay, that's good advice.
I always encourage that because people just assume, I didn't get this GPA. I didn't get this on the ACT, so therefore I can't get a scholarship. And it's like, no, they actually want to give you money if you didn't make this GPA and all that stuff. You'd be impressed how many people want you to succeed. So definitely encourage that. Is there anything before we wrap up that you would just like to share about your books, about your series?
For anyone watching, you will not regret reading anything I write. It's really good.
100%. Sometimes I wonder if I should just take like a full single episode to just talk about all the wonderful things I've learned from your book. It's a fun book, you all. Like, it's got the adventure, it's got the witty humor, it's got, just so many antics in it, but it's also just real. It's got real stuff. So it's 100%. This is like a 6 out of 5 star read. But you can check out the description. Jacqueline will be in there, her Instagram, her book. So check out the book 100%. You will not regret it. It is worth every single penny, every single minute you read it. You'll probably reread it. And then hit subscribe to this channel and like the video so we can continue to support indie authors. And I will see you next week.